Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This is Arpan from CloudMandu, and today we're going to be discussing front-end and back-end development. I'll be going through the differences between them, what actually goes on, languages that are used in front-end and back-end development, and we'll provide examples as we go on through the video. Without further ado, let's start. Alright, so to begin, you may be wondering what are the main differences between front-end and back-end development. Front-end development is what the user sees and how a user interacts with an application. This includes text, images, videos, and all of the other visual elements. Backend development is all the logic happening behind the scenes. The backend code is responsible for servers, databases, and making sure that the application runs properly. An example of the backend and frontend being used is when using an app like Instagram. When you post an image on Instagram, you will select a picture and use visual elements like text input fields and buttons to upload the image. This is an example of the frontend code. When you go on to upload, the frontend will send a request to the backend. The backend will handle saving the post to the database, making sure everyone that follows you sees it, handle sending responses back to the frontend regarding the post, etc. Another example of backend and frontend being used together is when posting a video on YouTube. You'd first select the video, then enter in the title, description, tags, etc. While doing this, you'd be using all sorts of visual components like buttons, fields, file fields, etc. This is an example of the front-end code. When you upload a video, a request is sent to the backend side of YouTube, and the backend will make sure that your video is uploaded properly, recommended on the home page, send notifications to your subscribers about it, notify you when someone comments on your video, just to name a few. Now that you know the difference between them, you may wonder what actually goes on in terms of how the front end will get information and how the back end and the front end of an application communicate. In simple terms, the front end sends requests to the back end and the back end will send a response to the front end. Things like APIs and requests are used to communicate between the back end and the front end of an application. For example, let's say the back end has a list of users and in the front end you want to display those users. You'd first send a GET request to fetch the backend's API. Then once you get the response from that API, you would store that response inside of a variable and then display the information using the same variable. Once you do that, the data retrieved from the backend will be displayed on the user's device. And to demonstrate this, here's a video example. Alright, so I already have everything set up, and this is not going to be a brief tutorial, but this example is mainly to give you an understanding. So right now I have two files and two tabs open. So this server.py file is basically my backend, and this is written in Flask with Python. So the backend is basically just returning a list of users right here in JSON, okay? And the backend is running on port 5000, and then on the front end, it's using React, and it's basically just fetching this backend and then putting these usernames right here, okay? And the front end is running on port 3000. Now, what I'm going to be explaining is how the front end is getting all of this information from the back end to display it right here. Okay, so to explain this to you, we need to go to the backend first. And in the backend, you can just see that I have this route called /users right here. And this route basically just returns a users array with a list of users, so A, B, C, and D. And then in the front end, what it's doing is just going to that route. So it's telling the front end to, fetch this route on the back end, and then whatever response that is shown on this page or whatever response that the backend throws, which is this return statement, we're going to set that response into this data variable right here, and then we're just going to access that data variable to display the data so that the user can see it. So what's basically going on, it's going to fetch this /users route, and when it fetches this, it's just going to get all of this over here and then set this into this data variable and then access that same data variable to show it over here. So it's just accessing this data variable, then accessing the users array inside that variable, and then mapping each user to a p tag. So if I were to go to the backend and change a few things, so if I say I change user D to user E, for example, and then I save these and then refresh the front end, you can see that it shows user E next. If I put nothing here, it's going to show nothing on the front end. So if I refresh it now, it's going to show nothing. And then if I just put hello world, it's going to show hello world right here. Okay, so now you have an understanding as to how they communicate, as well as knowing the differences between front end and back end. Now you may be wondering what languages and frameworks are used in both fields. The languages used in front end development include HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You can use HTML and CSS to create the UI and use JavaScript to make your site dynamic and make it more interactive. And once you gain more experience, you can use front-end libraries like React, Angular, and Vue, which are the most popular, and these libraries can be used to build user interfaces instead of using plain HTML and CSS. The languages used in backend development include Python, Ruby, C#, JavaScript, and more. The frameworks that are used in backend programming include Express, Flask, Ruby on Rails, .NET, and many more. These frameworks along with these languages can be used to create powerful applications, and if you'd like to use front-end libraries and have one of these languages serve as the backend, you can also do that by building an API. Alright guys, that's it for this video. I hope you learned the differences between front-end and back-end development. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them down below. If you're looking for a career path in IT, make sure to go to cloudmandu.com, and with that being said, have a nice one.